Thank you for listening to Soho Bites, the only podcast in the world, as far as we're aware, dedicated to talking about films set in Soho, the beating heart of bohemian cosmopolitan London. If you would like to support the show, you can do this in the form of a star rating or review at sohobitespodcast.com/review, or if you'd like to put a small amount of money where your mouth is, you can do that at sohobitespodcast.com/donate. Donations can be from as little as £3, which will buy, at London prices, about half a drink for one of our thirsty guests. You may hear some different URLs in the upcoming episode, but by far the easiest way is to follow one of those links. They are, again, sohobitespodcast.com/review and sohobitespodcast.com/donate. Thank you for your continued support and enjoy the episode.
My grandson, he's dying. He's dying. I'm w***ing. It's a mess.
Hello and welcome to episode 52 of Soho Bites. Soho Bites is the podcast in which we talk about Soho and the films that are set there. My name is Dominic Delaghi, and if you hadn't guessed from the teaser at the top of the show there, this episode is very NSFW and is not suitable for children. Please do not play it to your children. That was the last bleep I'll be using. There will be no more f***ing bleeps. Apart from that one, you have been warned. The film we're talking about in this episode is a relatively recent one by Soho Bite standards, and is only the second one we talked about to be made in this millennium. It's called Irina Palm from 2007 and stars that icon of 1960s counterculture, Marianne Faithfull. She plays Maggie, a middle-aged woman whose grandson is terminally ill, and so she starts working in a Soho sex establishment to raise funds for his treatment. Going by the alias of Irina Palm, she offers her many customers a very specific service. The name Palm should give you a clue as to what that service is. The film was very poorly received by UK critics, especially Peter Bradshaw of The Guardian, who described it as a gobsmackingly awful British film, awful in that way that somehow only British films can be. Is it as bad as all that, though? Maybe. The film deals with some quite serious topics: a dying child, how a woman can find herself working in the sex trade out of financial desperation. But does it address those subjects with the gravitas we might hope for? I'll be talking about Irina Palm in the second half of the show with my guest, the author Estella Tinknell, to see what her thoughts are on it. Before that, though, in the first half of the show, I'll be talking to somebody who knows a bit more about the subject of sex work than the male director and writers of Irina Palm seemingly do, Laura Watson. Laura is a spokesperson for the ECP, the English Collective of Prostitutes. Founded in 1975, the ECP campaigns for sex workers' rights and safety, and for the kinds of financial conditions and resources that would enable women to leave prostitution if that's what they want to do. They also campaign for the decriminalisation of prostitution, which puts them at odds with some other women's rights campaigners who argue, in some cases, for stricter laws surrounding the industry. It's fair to say that the current legal situation in the UK is a complex mess, and although all these campaigners have the same core aim, to protect women working in the sex industry, opinions differ as to how this can be achieved. To find out more about the ECP's position on this, its history and its campaigns, I took myself off to meet Laura in North London. I nearly got a nosebleed. Kentish Town to be exact, where the ECP has its offices. I began by asking Laura to tell me how the ECP started back in 1975.
We were founded by two migrant sex workers, and they were inspired by the French Prostitutes Collective, who occupied a church in Lyon against violence against sex workers, against mothers' poverty, and against criminalisation of sex workers in Lyon and in France. And they took over the church and occupied it. And they had an organisation as well to campaign for what they wanted. And so the two women here wanted to do the same. Neither of them were English, but they were in England. So they called themselves the English Collective of Prostitutes, based on the French Prostitutes Collective. They went around lots of different women's groups trying to find support and help, basically, and were turned away by many, and then finally found the Wages for Housework campaign, who at the time were based in King's Cross, and met Selma James, who founded the Wages for Housework campaign, who said, yes, please come and join us. And then that's how the ECP became an autonomous organisation within the Wages for Housework campaign. So we had our own campaigns, our own demands, our own goals, but we were also campaigning for wages for housework and for economic alternatives for women in particular, so that we could leave prostitution or didn't have to go into it if we didn't want to. So our demands were particular to us, which were to end the criminalisation of sex workers.
This is the initial aims of the organisation, and they remain the same today?
Yeah, the initial aims, they were worded slightly differently, but we've always said we want alternatives to prostitution. We want an end to women's and mothers' poverty. One of our first public statements back in the 70s was called For Prostitutes Against Prostitution, which was a very important statement. And we stand by that statement today. And we are defending sex workers and what sex workers need and are demanding, but we are not supporting sex work. We are not glamorizing it. We're not encouraging people to go into it or saying that it's a glamorous, fantastic job, because it's not. But we are saying this is what women in prostitution need.
First tonight, a bizarre protest in a London church in which masked prostitutes sat in the pews while the congregation celebrated Mass. Members of the English Collective of Prostitutes occupied the Church of the Holy Cross in the King's Cross red light district.
A key event in the ECP's history is this famous sit-in at the Holy Cross Church in King's Cross in 1982. Could you go into the background about that a little bit and tell me about that?
Yes, we were based at the King's Cross Women's Centre, right in the thick of King's Cross in the 1980s, which was at the time a very, very big red light area. Hundreds of women working from all over the country. Women used to get the train down from all over just to work in King's Cross on the street. And we were right there. Basically, women were just being picked up constantly by the police for prostitution offences and going to court. It was rubber stamped by a magistrate, criminal record, fine, blah, blah, blah. That was just like constant. And our rights sheet said, for the first time, you don't have to plead guilty. You know, you can fight your case. You can challenge the police. You can say, no, I'm not doing anything wrong.
So before, the thinking was plead guilty, over and done with.
Pay your fine, get out.
Yeah,
just get back on the street, pay your fine and just get out. I mean, we're working with women now who are in the ECP who have historical convictions, hundreds of convictions. We're actually doing a big campaign to get cautions and convictions taken off women's records. And the government have just now announced that if you have convictions for loitering and soliciting from when you're under 18, they will be taken off your record, which is good because some of the women in our group do have convictions from when they were under 18. So they will no longer come up on a CRB check when you're trying to get a job or whatever. So that was sort of happening on a big scale. Women started to say, no, I'm not going to put up with this anymore. I'm going to start challenging it. And in the end, women working in King's Cross with the ECP met and just said that's enough, and obviously got inspiration from the women in France. Mm-hmm. And there was the Holy Cross Church around the corner, and they just said, look, we have to take refuge from this situation. I mean, the police were sitting outside the women's centre waiting for women to come out.
To nick them.
Yeah, something dramatic needed to happen to change the terrain, basically, and also to get out the message to the public of what was happening to women here, so that there was a bit of a public outcry, really, like, you know, this is really wrong what's happening to women here. So they took over the church, they walked in,
Very respectfully, though, from what they still allowed the services to go on, and the vicar was on their side. Did the vicar know in advance that it was going to take place?
No.
Okay, so it was,
And that was
so
the
it was
same in
awareness
France.
raising more than anything else.
No,
Is that
it
what
was
they-
awareness raising, but it was really trying to stop the police from carrying on in King's Cross as
but by
well.
shining a light on that to make
And to say, look, and make national news, which they did, what was happening to women in King's Cross. They had their sleeping bags with them. A couple of women had children with them. I don't know if they had food. I know people bought them food. And then as the congregation left, they just stayed there, and they were there for 12 days in total. A lot of work was going on, writing statements, speaking to the press. They had to designate people who were going to do different things, and also allowing women to come in and out, security. There's quite a lot of elements to it. There were film crews coming. There were, it was on the national news.
Yeah.
Wearing masks to protect their identities, they went ahead with an early morning breakfast and announced their intention to stay put.
Well, a number of women came into the church after the evening service and explained to the vicar what the situation was, and said that we were going to stay until we had seen the people that we were asking to see, and until we had some guarantees that the situation would change.
What they won specifically was for the local council to look into it, basically, and to do a whole review of the situation and what was happening. And it was a big turning point in terms of changing the terrain nationally, and also that there is this organisation speaking up for sex workers, and this is what sex workers need, and this is what's happening to women. I mean, that was a massive change.
So currently, the law is that exchanging sex for money is not illegal, but virtually everything else around it is. You can't advertise, you can't solicit, you can't curb crawl. Is that about right? Is that the...
Yeah, but the main thing is for women, you can't loiter and solicit on the street, which is you can't work on the street because you can't work without loitering and soliciting.
Isn't that an old law? Isn't that go back
from
to the
50s, that law. But also on the street, they've introduced many civil orders, which is what they mostly criminalise women on the street now with. So now they don't generally arrest you for loitering and soliciting, but they will say, okay, there's an order on this entire area, you're banned from working. If you're caught working, you breach the order and you're criminalised that way. So that's how they mostly target women working on the street now. If you're working from premises, 2 or more sex workers is a brothel, and that's illegal. So basically criminalising working with somebody else for safety, which obviously...
Does this include a receptionist as well?
Includes anyone. You're not allowed a receptionist or anybody working with you, because that would be controlling prostitution, which sounds like pimping or something like that, but it's not. The actual legislation does not include force and coercion. And so controlling is just helping somebody to work. So if you're a receptionist, security guard, taking calls, anything like that, that's controlling prostitution. Those are the 3 main laws: the loitering and soliciting, and the civil orders on the street. The brothel keeping and the controlling are the main ones we are up against, and we want decriminalised.
So the situation that people would have seen in walking around Soho is the walk-ups, the little pink cards that say model first floor. So to operate within the law, are they just women operating by themselves in a flat, so people can walk from the street up to a door, go into the door? It sounds horrifically dangerous.
Soho is a very, very specific way of working. There's no other place like it in the whole of the country. Most places are closed door. You have to book an appointment. You find the advert online or whatever it is. You don't just walk in. So Soho is very, very unique. It's also very, very unique that it's been there for, some of the flats have been brothels for 100 years.
Yeah.
Very, very historical places of work. Generally has the support of the local community and the eye of the local community. If you're a closed door and you're advertising online, you have various security checks that you want to go through before you accept clients. Soho, you don't have that because someone's just there. So
is part of the safety of it the fact that it is in Soho and it's a busy area?
Absolutely.
So you're not
and
just
if something goes wrong, you throw your head out the window and scream. And you've got 1,000 people there, on the street.
So in the early noughties, in one of these kind of waves of gentrification. There were lots of flats were shut down and there was police raids. Sometimes it was, the police said it was an anti-trafficking measure and that kind of thing, but it seems to be gentrification. That seemed to be a concerted campaign by the police at that stage.
Yeah, I mean, there have been many, many waves of police raids and closing of flats and various different things. Often it seems linked to gentrification, where there's some connection to some building work or some regeneration or something happening at the same time, which after a few incidents is not coincidental.
Yeah.
It's the same for, the LGBT venues in Soho have completely decreased. You know, there's lots of historical sort of reasons why people go to Soho that are just not there anymore, or they're much, much less than they used to be. But yeah, they sort of put out the PR of saying that it's trafficking, but I've been in court with women who stand up and say, I'm not trafficked, I'm not forced, I'm working of my own free will, and I need this flat to stay open. And still the magistrate just says, no, we're closing it, and blah, blah, blah. I mean, in the raids later, they closed almost half the flats down. Hundreds of police with dogs, you know, full riot gear, very extreme, just for women. And, you know, women photographed by the press in their underwear. It was a very heavy situation. And women did challenge the closures of the flats, and in some cases won against the closures.
If a flat is owned by a person somewhere, they're renting it out to another person, that person is doing their thing there, what grounds do they have for closing them down? Surely that's just like private arrangements between individuals or companies.
No, you can't. If you're a landlord, you can't let to a sex worker knowingly.
Oh, so this is another of those things, it's illegal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Women are working illegally all over the place, because if you're working with someone else, then you're working illegally. But obviously women want to work safely, and working with someone else is the first obvious thing you do to work more safely. So that's happening right now. And it doesn't necessarily mean that women are constantly criminalised for it. It means that the police pick and choose. You know, you go on for years and years and years, and suddenly they decide to do a mass raid on the whole area, or on some place has been going for 25 years, and then suddenly the police raid it, and you're like, what? Why? Like, what? They've been going for years. The police knew about it, everything.
Well, it's been the story of Soho for decades, that the police will do intermittent raids to keep up appearances. And that's been going since definitely since the war, Second World War.
Yeah, I mean, what we found out in the last mass raids, though, which were 2011, was that the police were actually getting money for anti-trafficking. So that was the motive, even though there wasn't traffic. Women came to court and said that's not the situation, but that was their PR. But also they change it. You know, one minute they say somebody was killed in the doorway of a walk up, and then the next minute they say, oh no, there wasn't somebody killed, it's to do with trafficking. I mean, they just make it up. It's to say anything just to try and close them. And then there was a big gentrification happening then as well. I mean, now if you go down there, you can see the gentrification happened, but there's no sign of any flats. You wouldn't even know that they used to be there now.
The other thing I wanted to talk about from the back of that is this quite recent thing. Gangs of boys, young men, teenagers storming up the stairs of walk-ups. That seems quite a new thing. I wasn't aware of that happening in the past. What's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about gangs. I think they were groups of friends who were trying to get likes on TikTok and decided to harass women in Soho by trying to film clients, trying to film women coming in and out, throwing rubbish in doorways, calling, saying, this weekend, as many of you come down and we'll congregate outside the flats, and try and intimidate the women, basically. I mean, it was a lot of young people. It was boys and girls, actually, but who would come on the bigger sort of things.
Just for a laugh, just for a kind of...
It was just, I think it was like, you know, they were getting over 1 million views on TikTok or whatever it was. But that led to, I don't know if the same people or encouraged other people who were, you know, in masks and trying to break down women's doors, rip off CCTV, and in some cases nearly getting in flats to try and attack women. So it was extremely intimidating, and the police did nothing about it, basically. I mean, they had a lot of talk about it, and we're very concerned, and here's a phone number to call, but the phone number, nobody answered when the women called it, and they had a lot of hustle and bustle about it, but actually nothing was done.
So you campaign for decriminalisation, but there are different kind of models of that decriminalisation. So there's the Nordic model, there's the kind of German-Dutch model, and there's also the New Zealand model. As I understand it, you're opposed to the Nordic model and leaning more towards the New Zealand model. Could you talk about what each of those are and why you lean towards one and not the other so much?
Yeah, so the New Zealand model, they decriminalised prostitution in 2003, and they basically removed the criminal laws which criminalised sex workers and reintroduced health and safety legislation for sex workers. So instead of it being in criminal law, it was health and safety. And the law, as you read it, ensures that sex workers are as safe as possible. And their laws were quite similar to the laws that we still currently have here. So the laws that prevent you from working together for safety, and then giving you a criminal record, which then means that you can't actually leave prostitution and you're stuck in prostitution. All of that in New Zealand has been removed and replaced with specific legislation, which means that you can work together for safety, you can work without facing criminal sanctions, you can report to the police without fearing arrest for prostitution yourself. That is what we would want here. Our primary concern is sex workers' safety and what enables sex workers to work in the safest way possible. We also want sex workers to be able to leave if and when you want to, which comes down to whether you have a criminal record or not, but also what your financial alternatives
Child
are.
benefit situations.
Yeah. So that also needs to be looked at in terms of what do sex workers need to be able to leave. Housing, whatever it is, benefits, higher wages, whatever, those are the issues that women have. So those are the issues that need to be looked at if you're serious about getting women out of prostitution.
So can you compare that to the Nordic model, which is that some people who also, purport to want the safety of women as well, they argue for the Nordic model. Could you explain what that is and why you disagree with that?
Yeah, so the Nordic model basically aims to stop prostitution through criminalising demand by the client. And the theory of it is that you decriminalise the women because they haven't done anything wrong, but you criminalise the men, and therefore demand will reduce and therefore prostitution will reduce. This is the theory. Where the law has been implemented, which is in a number of European countries in particular, it was first introduced in Sweden in 1999, and more recently in Ireland, which is what we know most about because we have a sister organisation in Ireland, the Street Workers Collective, who work under the Nordic model. And basically the impact of criminalising the client has a detrimental safety element to it for women. It doesn't stop prostitution because women's need for money is still there. So women are still working under the Nordic model in the same numbers that they were before the Nordic model.
Right.
It's just that you're functioning in a more difficult situation. So it hasn't stopped it, and that's its main goal, is to stop it. They say that prostitution is driven by men's desire for sex, but actually it's women's need for money which drives prostitution.
Okay.
And so if you want to stop prostitution, that's what you have to deal with. There's no way of clamping down on prostitution via criminal means. In the Nordic model, one of the hardest things is screening clients. If you're working on the street, for example, and the client is criminalised, they don't want to be hanging around while you check them out, write down their number plate, call your friend to tell them that you're going. Yeah, because if a police comes, you can be arrested. So you get in the car as quick as possible and you go off. It's very dangerous. Same with online working or in-person or brothel working. There's no screening. It's very, very difficult to screen. Nobody wants to give out their information. The client's not going to give you their name because if the police comes and raids, they've got all your details and you're automatically criminalised because the actual buying of sex is criminalised. Violence has increased in various countries where it's introduced, namely in France, where there have been various reports of increased violence against sex workers as a result of the not being able to screen. And violent men know all of this and take advantage of these situations, that women are more vulnerable and are in a worse situation. And that's been documented in a number of countries, including in France and Ireland. And so we're completely against it, basically, for those reasons. And there are many politicians that are trying to bring it in here, in England and Wales and in Scotland. But there was just a bill to actually introduce it in Scotland, which just fell, which was great as a result of Scotland for Decrim's work. But there were always threats here in England and Wales to introduce it. And they have the Nordic model also in Northern Ireland. So it's around a lot. There are many politicians campaigning for it, but we're completely against it.
So the politicians that are campaigning for it, not without, don't name names or anything.
I can name names.
Well, I mean, I'm just thinking sort of internationally. Is it a left-right split? Is it a man-woman split? Is it no? So
it happens to be a lot of women, actually, because one of the ways that they talk about it is prostitution is not prostitution. Prostitution is exploitation.
Yeah.
The
so
whole
this is the
thing is
position of people like
exploitation.
Julie Bindel,
Rachel Moran,
who she writes very compellingly.
Yeah.
I mean, I think she advocates for something stronger than Nordic model. I can't quite remember now. She doesn't seem to address, from what I can remember, the women's poverty side of it. It's more to do with clamping down on the men than supporting the women.
Yeah.
That seems to be your sort of central bone of contention.
Yeah, definitely. But also addressing ways of addressing violence against women, because obviously women do suffer violence in prostitution. We are the ones dealing with it because women come to us for help. We do a lot of casework on a range of issues, including violence. Our biggest issue, which has always been the issue, is that the police will not do anything about violence against sex workers. On a serious scale, obviously there are one-off cases where men get convicted, but it's very, very difficult for sex workers to report violence because you're scared about getting arrested for prostitution or even saying that you're a sex worker. There's a lot of stigma and discrimination that comes with it. There's, your immigration status might not be perfect. And so women will not come forward and report it. The police, in a recent case we had, threatened a woman who'd reported serious violence against a client that her child would be investigated by social services if she were to take the case forward. So obviously she didn't take it forward. The police ensure that women can't come forward and report. There were a lot of robberies recently in West London targeting the same flats over and over again, particularly migrant women. And women were reporting it to projects or whoever they could report it to, but they would not come forward and report it to the police because of their immigration. And the police absolutely refused to put the immigration to one side and take the reports and take them seriously. And this is women who had full information about the guys, registration plates, CCTV footage, and nothing was done about it. So after a few cases, you start to think this is strategic. Systemic. This is not one-off. This is definitely a whole picture that we're dealing with. We want it also put in context. 1 woman a week is killed by their partner or ex-partner, and we're not threatening to criminalise marriage as a result of this epidemic of violence against women. Prostitution is violent because the laws are not on women's side and we don't have the protections that we need, and the police are refusing to deal with the violence. And we are trying to do something about it, but the laws really need to change. And the Nordic model doesn't do anything to change that situation. It just makes the situation much heavier for sex workers in relation to more criminal laws being added rather than them being taken away.
This is a podcast about Soho specifically. If you achieve your ultimate aims and you can delete the app, if it was a dating app, what does Soho look like specifically? Is it gone too far now, or will it revert to something that it has been in the past, a safer version of what it was in the past?
No, it would mean that women were working legally rather than illegally. If they are working with somebody else, it means that you could possibly even have a third person working with you, so there's even more of you, if you have the space for that or whatever it is, it would mean that you can report to the police without fear of arrest yourself. You can say the whole situation. You can say that you're sex workers.
Bouncers on doorways?
Well, yes.
Yeah.
Also, in the New Zealand legislation's talking about the right to refuse clients, which is a crucial measure of exploitation, is how can you say no or not? If you have the right to say no and it's enforced, then that's a massive difference for women. You know, if violent men know that something's going to happen to them if they attack women, it changes the situation. You know, a lot of violent men start with sex workers because they know they're going to get away with it.
Thank you very much to Laura Watson from the ECP for coming on the show to talk about the important work of that organisation. If you'd like to read more about the ECP, you can visit their website at prostitutescollective.net. I'll put a link to that in the show notes for this episode. That's episode 52, Irina Palm, and there'll also be a link to their very interesting YouTube channel there. As ever, all of that can be found at the usual address, sohobitespodcast.com. Hello, this is what's known as a mid-roll ad. It's one of those annoying interruptions that's inserted retrospectively at just the wrong point. And the reason for it is that Soho Bites takes up hours of time every month, and I'm hoping you might be able to support the show. There are two ways you can do this. One is for free, and it's to leave the show a star rating or kind review. You can do that at sohobitespodcast.com/review. Or if you'd like to assist financially to help cover our costs, you can do that at sohobitespodcast.com/donate. Thank you very much. Apologies for the interruption, and back to the episode. (2007's) Irina Palm, although ostensibly a British film with very British locations, is actually more of an international affair. It's directed by a Belgian, Sam Garbarski. The original script was written in French by another Belgian, Philippe Blasband, and it was set in a peep show in Brussels. The language and location were changed to English and London after they failed to get Belgian financing, at which point a British writer, Martin Heron, was brought on board to give the new English version of the script that certain je ne sais quoi. That means I don't know what, in Belgian. Heading up the cast is Marianne Faithfull as Maggie, whose grandson is dying of an unspecified illness, an illness which apparently is untreatable by the NHS. The only place he can receive the treatment is Australia, and all in all it will cost £6,000 to get him and the family over there. This causes Maggie to do a facial expression which I think was a kind of acting, although it was difficult to tell because her performance is essentially monotone throughout. Maggie's distraught son and daughter-in-law, Tom and Sarah, are played by Kevin Bishop and Siobhan Hewlett, and they do a reasonable job despite the clunky script. Other parts are played by Jenny Agata as Jane, the top dog in Maggie's group of posh lady friends, Serbian actor Miki Manojlovic as the manager of the sex club in which Maggie finds employment, and her friend at the club, Louisa, is played by the Hungarian actress Dorka Grillis. My apologies to Philippe, Mickey and Dorka if I mispronounce your names, although I doubt you're listening. Funding for the project eventually came from Belgium, the UK, Germany, France and Luxembourg, so when Peter Bradshaw described it as awful in the way that somehow only British films can be, he wasn't quite right. I mean, it is pretty awful, but possibly not actually very British. Marianne Faithfull is front and centre throughout the film. The camera follows her nearly all the time. In her frumpy brown coat and her frumpy brown boots, she plods around the sleepy commuter belt village where she lives, and then from place to place in London, looking first for a loan and then for a job, but she encounters only rudeness and humiliation wherever she goes.
You're already heavily in debt. You've got nothing to borrow against. I mean, you've got no income, you've got no savings, and you don't own your own home anymore.
My grandson is dying. I need money.
You have no skills, no employment history, and no qualifications. What is it that you think I can do for you? Look, I'm going to be honest. At your age, it's going to be almost impossible to find you anything.
Eventually, finding herself in Soho, she spots a scrawled sign in a doorway which reads, "Hostess required, excellent rates," and she inquires, as they say, within. She doesn't seem to notice the wall of pornography she passes on the way to the manager's office, and she seems shocked to discover during her interview with Mickey the manager what the work of a Soho hostess actually entails.
Show me your hands. I'm not going to bite. Very smooth. Many girls work here. Their hands are okay, but...
I think we'll have a bit less of that.
Okay, this is the deal. Can you wank men off?
What?
Can you wank men off?
What?
Can you wank men off?
Yes. No.
Despite her misgivings, Maggie eventually decides to accept the work for the sake of her dying grandson, and is shown the ropes by Louisa, another of Mickey's hostesses. It's basically a coin-operated glory hole. Horny punters insert some coins in the slot, drop the trolleys, pop their appendage through a hole in the wall, and the hostess on the other side administers hand relief.
First, you get a good grip. See? See how it stiffens? Circumcised, not so sensitive. Grip tighter.
After her initial reticence, Maggie finds she has an aptitude for the work and becomes, under her new working name of Irina Palm, a Soho legend, with queues forming halfway around the club. She begins to take pride in her work and leverages her popularity to secure a large advance on her next few months' wages, which covers all the costs of the Australia trip. However, back home in her village, when her family and neighbours discover how she's raising the money, it causes a right old hoo-ha. I actually find it quite difficult to encapsulate what's wrong at the core of Irina Palm, but I think it essentially comes down to a couple of things. Firstly, Marianne Faithfull has to carry the whole film, but she just doesn't have the acting superpowers to pull it off. Her performance is flat, listless and monotonous, even a bit amdram at times, and I did initially wonder if this was intentional, meant to suggest that Maggie's on Prozac or Valium, but this is never alluded to, so I think it's actually just bad acting. Having said that, I'm not sure a stronger performance from a better actor could have rescued the film, because the script is pretty awful, and this is the second reason I think it doesn't work, the whole thing is fundamentally implausible. It's completely unbelievable, for example, that a 61-year-old woman, a baby boomer who became an adult in the permissive 1960s, could have led a life so sheltered that she thinks a hostess in a Soho clip joint just collects glasses and runs a duster over the mantelpiece, or that she would be shocked in that location to hear the words sex and wank. It's also risible, incidentally, that she doesn't know what the word euphemism means. The relationships in her life and the interactions she has are equally unbelievable. From the cartoonishly bitchy cohort of posh ladies in her village and the one-dimensional authority figures who thwart her attempts to raise money, to the friendship she develops at the club, to the weirdly furious response of her son to finding out what she's been up to, none of it sits right. In fact, the club itself, and apologies if you've already made plans to visit Soho on the strength of this film, is based on a fantasy. Coin-operated wanking booths do not exist, certainly not in Soho anyway, and not, as far as I can make out, anywhere else, not even in Japan, which is where the character of Mickey claims to have got the idea. And of course, lots of films are implausible. Hello 007, but there's something that jars about the implausibility in Irina Palm. I think it's to do with the fact that it's shot in a docudrama handheld style, which gives it a sense of it being a gritty slice of life, when it's actually nothing of the sort. The cinematography is actually really good, and for the first half an hour, it felt like I was watching something like a maudlin Mike Leigh drama, and many of the foreign reviews did interpret it along those lines, but not me. In an interview with the Cine Europa website, the film's director, Sam Garbarski, says, "When you watch the film, the story could almost be real. Everything you see exists in reality, the walls, the sex shops." To quote another famous Belgian, Hercule Poirot, "I don't think so, mate." Oh, and the music's horrible. My second guest today is Estella Tinknell. She's a former Associate Professor of Film and Culture at the University of the West of England in Bristol and has written extensively about popular culture and the representation of ageing women in British films, as well as many other topics. Who better then to talk about a film starring an ageing cultural icon like Marianne Faithfull. We met up online and I asked her to kick off our conversation by telling me, in a nutshell, if possible, her overall view of Irina Palm.
In a nutshell, I think the film doesn't know what it's for or what it's doing, quite frankly. I mean, there's a kind of aesthetic of social realism, but it's not really a Ken Loach-style drama because it doesn't really interrogate very closely the issues of sex and class which emerge out of the sex industry. And it could be a kind of sentimental comedy. And there are moments which could be funny, but they're not really played for comedy. And I can't quite work out if that's to do with the writing, which isn't particularly good. The dialogue is pretty hackneyed and corny. The acting is a bit strange. And it kind of falls between so many different stools. It's extraordinarily slow moving. And that is
incredibly slow.
Moves at a glacial pace, not only in terms of a kind of the pace of a narrative, but even the acting. I mean, poor old Marianne Faithfull, every kind of reaction shot appears to have been slowed up. So you're kind of waiting for things to happen all the time, and not a lot does. So there's that. But there's also some of the fundamental implausibilities of the story. It's kind of evidence that the film hasn't been made by people who actually have grown up in the UK. And I notice ridiculous things like the interiors are so clearly Belgian to me. I happen to have lived in Brussels, so I kind of know what a Belgian interior looks like. And then the implausibility of this woman living in this kind of commuter village, this rather picturesque commuter village, travelling into Soho and not quite understanding what she's getting into. So many issues there to unpack, really. So I tried to rewatch it and I was finding it so incredibly slow moving and really rather boring. The Soho stuff actually is really interesting because I'd done some stuff on last night in Soho, which really glamorises sex work, actually. Now, this film doesn't do that. And I think that's actually, the grubbiness of it is really well presented, actually. It's so prosaic, isn't it? All these men lining up, you know. It's prosaically grubby. But the problem is, it tends to say that the only work women do, especially an older woman, is housework or sex work. And even the way in which Mickey, the pimp proprietor, takes her hand and says, oh, yes, your hands are ideal for this. Hands that do dishes are ideal for this work, you know. And it's like, that's the work, that's women's work, is it? It's either housework or it's sex work. And but then it's also caring work, it's caring labour as well, you know. So there's the three kinds of labour that women do. But there's no space given for any other kind of work that is legitimate for women to do, really. I think one of the reasons actually thinking about it is that they wanted to emphasise the entirely transactional nature of this work. She doesn't even encounter these men. She has no idea who they are. Or she simply knows them from their groans and grunts, you know. We never really see, we just see a line of them waiting. We don't look at their faces. I think in some ways that's quite an interesting choice to do that. So it doesn't romanticise it at all, where it's lit, everything, the little kind of cubby hole she has to live in, you know, while she's sit in while she's there, and she sort of brings along her flask of tea, you know, it's all so prosaic. And there she is, poor old Marianne Faithfull, sitting in that dreadful overall, the sort of thing that you'd wear to do the housework in.
The house coat,
a floral overall, you know, and those boots that she never removes, you know, she's got these rather sort of dowdy, chunky winter boots that she sort of stomps around in all day, you know. And obviously the intention is to show the kind of contrast between this grandmotherly figure who's doing this and presumably the illusions of her customers. But that doesn't come over either, does it? They don't make anything of her having this exoticized, vaguely Eastern European name, Irina Palm, and that's kind of thrown away. And they kind of don't make anything of it. I quite like the fact that it doesn't remotely romanticize it, makes it entirely transactional, but it also at the same time makes it ludicrous in some ways, doesn't it? You know, as I say, unlike Last Night in Soho, which kind of romanticizes and almost eroticizes the relationship, so we kind of forget that maybe there's a critique to be conducted of this. It doesn't allow for that, but it perhaps airs over into the kind of talk with the heart, you know. But they're normally older women who've seen it all, aren't they? You know, the Tart of the Heart is an older woman, but she's seen it all, love.
Sort of motherly type. And
yeah, they're motherly, exactly. And although she is a mother, she's not motherly in this particular context, I don't think.
Do you think that Because I've read some reviews where it says some humorous moments are provided by X, Y, and Z. I couldn't find any humorous moments in it. I mean, I've watched it 3 times now. I think that's one of the problems with it, that absolute monotone.
Yeah, it is very, very monotonal as well as somewhat monotonous. Yeah. It doesn't, and I don't know whether that's to do with the lack of sense of purpose or narrative drive that it seems to have. But that's the problem with it, because on paper you might say, well, this is quite an interesting story, actually. But so much of it is unexplained, inexplicable.
I did read somewhere that an interview with the director, whose name is Sam Garbarsky, he said that they decided to move it to the UK because the kind of wanking granny thing was more of a kind of seaside Benny Hill type thing, a bit hardy ha ha ha. But they haven't done that with it. It just feels pretty filthy. It doesn't even feel like a Robin Asquith film, you know?
No, exactly. I mean, I'm not suggesting that it should have been. And that kind of taking sex work as a kind of fun and games for the women who participate in it, feels a bit like a Benny Hill script being made by Ken Loach.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the only scene that works on any level in a comedic way is when she reveals to the snobby ladies what she's been up to, and they're kind of sort of disgusted but also kind of enthralled as well.
Yes, they're fascinated.
They're sort of desperate to ask questions about the size of the equipment and everything, and
but again,
that's sort
it kind of
vaguely
plays
funny,
into
but
stereotypes of middle-class women, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But they are simultaneously repressed and desperate for sex.
The light's always been off.
Yeah.
In their experience.
Yeah. And so it just seems to me that and probably Englishness as well, probably some sense that this is what Englishness is about.
In their Belgian settings.
In their very Belgian sitting rooms, which are incredibly
Yeah, which I'm fascinated by.
bourgeois.
I hadn't noticed, it hadn't struck me as being Belgian, but then I've never been inside a Belgian house.
Belgium, in terms of its kind of culture, is an extraordinarily bourgeois society. And in ways that, in things like decor, for example, people seem to go in for very sort of big, heavy furniture, which is quite ornate, thick carpets, draped curtains. Now, up to a point, you can say that in the UK we do the same. But generally speaking, people who are in their 60s don't have that kind of furniture. They would have grown up in, well,
old-fashioned, that, isn't it?
It's very old-fashioned, but having lived in Belgium, I remember noticing this over and over again, actually, It's very, very kind of stuffy and ornate. And I'm sure that Belgians themselves assume the same, it's true of the UK. But actually, there are subtle differences in things like decor, this is not the same. And when she was in the kitchen, the thing I noticed, this is a ridiculous thing, okay, I thought, oh, I see, the sink is sideways onto the window. And that's something you get throughout the rest of continental Europe. But in the UK, we always put the sink under the window.
Yeah, looking out into the garden.
That's not a British house, I thought to myself. And then I started to notice of it, and then I looked it up, and it said the interiors are filmed in Belgium. So I thought, okay, that really makes sense now. I can see all the other elements that are definitely not a kind of British setting,
Well, I'm paying you for your film knowledge, and I get interior design as well. But I don't think they were trying to write a kind of critical appraisal of the sex industry. But I can't work out what it was they were trying to do. If it wasn't this, bawdy romp, which it certainly isn't, what I don't know what they're trying to achieve.
It's one part, some kind of social comedy. I think the comedy bits are supposed to be, for example, when she's in the village shop, the horrible revelation of the Jenny Agutter character, her supposed best friend, who it's revealed in a public space, i.e. the local village shop, that she somehow, likes a bit of spanking or something. And again, it's the sort of thing that, sort of dated allusion to, a bit of rough and tumble,
Yeah.
But it's terrible. It's just plain.
Slap and tickle, how's your father? All those things.
Exactly. All those British euphemisms, Apparently she doesn't know what the word euphemism means, apparently.
That is absolutely ludicrous. Marianne Faithfull was 61 when she made the film. So she's a boomer. Her youth was in the 60s. It's ridiculous to try to make the audience believe that she could be that naive.
Well, exactly. I mean, Marianne Faithfull is known as a kind of symbol, 60s free spirit, isn't she?
Yeah.
Supposedly a symbol of kind of sexual revolution, which, as we know, in reality didn't really benefit women very much. And indeed, Marianne Faithfull herself paid the price because that's what people got to know about her. Her association with the Rolling Stones also gave her some kind of cultural credibility, but it also meant she had to carry that baggage with her the rest of her life, having been this kind of symbol of supposed sexual freedom for a brief moment in one decade. And I actually think she's a really interesting performer in lots of ways, but not as an actress. She's a pretty interesting singer. The Ballad of Lucy Jordan, which is a wonderful song, actually, which she delivers, and it's a kind of torch song, you know, this kind of song of regrets, basically, or what a woman will never do once she's reached middle age. And it's a fabulous song. And Marianne Faithfull was a really great singer and sort of delivering those kind of folky, torchy songs. But her career has always been contextualized by this knowledge that we have of her, you know. And I think that probably in something like Girl on a Motorcycle, which exploits that image, is fantastic. But then we can't not know that when we see her in this film. So it lacks plausibility.
And she didn't die at 27, which is what you're supposed to do, those people from that generation.
Exactly.
The 27
Could have
Club,
been a
isn't there?
tragic blonde, couldn't she? A tragic blonde. Oh, how terrible. Beautiful Marianne, you know, sort of frozen forever in her beauty. But she gets old and she sort of does it without worrying about it in a way, doesn't she? You know.
She did become a person who was known for being somebody who had been this beautiful, and she was absolutely gorgeous when she was younger. She was absolutely stunning.
Yeah, absolutely. But of course, I mean, she fell into drug addiction, impoverishment. You know, once the 60s were over, her life became very dark indeed because she was addicted to heroin. But she turned herself around. Then she kind of reinvented herself. And I do think it's really interesting that she was not someone who went down the road of endless facelifts and attempting to glamorize herself. Yeah. She was what she was, basically, still carrying that glamour because she still has that beauty. But she's very clearly a 60-year-old woman. She's not someone who's attempting to look like somebody 30 years younger. And I think it's also that the space she carved out for herself in popular music was not pop music, which requires you to produce this kind of often a kind of artificial, glamorous self, but something else. So she kind of carves out this career in a different style of musical performance, which is one which kind of enables you to do something a bit different. I'm not saying it's better, but I think it's a rather different kind of career than we might have expected from her persona in the 1960s.
And her voice completely changed, didn't it?
Oh, yes. Her voice is much more gravelly, apparently due to the kind of addictions and so on,
fags.
You know. Yeah, and the fags. But that gives her so much personality, doesn't it? In fact, if you hear her sing, it's a really unmistakable voice. You recognise her voice. But as an actress, not really, I think.
No, I mean, I think I've seen her in this, and I've seen it in the motorbike film, which is a kind of, you know, it's a bit of 60s frippery, really. But I've never seen her acting really until this film. I mean, first of all, I thought she's making an interesting choice here, that kind of like very, very slow and everything. But actually, I just think she's not very good in it. And there are other people around, like Jenny Agutter is a decent actor. She could have played that part. And I was speaking to somebody about this a couple of weeks ago, and they suggested Brenda Fricker would have been quite good in the part.
Yes.
I thought, that's quite an inspired choice.
And Brenda Fricker she's not glamorous. She's not played glamorous roles. So she is already established as a kind of grandmotherly figure, I suppose, isn't she, in some ways? And because Marianne Faithfull carries the ghost of her past with her at all times, it's almost as though we keep superimposing the earlier version of her and finding it not plausible. And that is because she isn't really an actress to some extent. The character that Marianne Faithfull is playing is of a kind of defeated woman, isn't it? This is a woman whose life has not turned out the way she hoped. She's married at 17, gets pregnant, loses the baby. 10 years later, she has her son, who she dotes on. He's a bit indifferent to her. And then they've got the grandson, who is the focus of the entire family's anxiety for understandable reasons. But even that, it seems to me, is an excuse to make her go into the sex industry, and not a very plausible one. The NHS doesn't say to you, it's going to cost you thousands of pounds to have this. And nor does it say, oh, the magic cure is in Australia and you can go there and have it,
The magic cure for this unnamed disease.
Exactly, this mysterious disease. There's always a magic cure, and it's always in America or Australia. It's this extraordinary sort of fiction the British are peculiarly addicted to. The idea that our NHS doesn't actually deliver those things, but it does, And the kind of negativity about Britain was something I found annoying. So all the representatives of kind of institutional power are completely negative, aren't they?
Yeah, the people in the
bank.
Yeah, the bank, and also the employment agency as well.
Which was bizarre to me. Why couldn't he have offered her a cleaning job,
Yeah, anything at
I don't
all.
know.
Yeah, everything is negativity throughout. There's obviously a lot of tension between the two parents right from the start. They're doing this, bitching at each other, and it's just absolutely relentless. How this kid remains cheerful with this horrible family dynamic and an unknown fatal disease is beyond me.
But none of it's explained, is it really?
No.
Given that she's already sold her house in order to support them, why is it the dynamic is so negative? And I kept waiting for someone to give me a bit of that backstory, and it didn't really happen.
No, that backstory scene when she's in the pub with Louisa, who has warmed to her after thinking, who is this old frumpy granny?
That's right. Who's this old bag, basically?
Yeah, and they do have this perfunctory conversation where it's, oh, my life is like this. And then she says, oh, my husband was a bastard to me, and blah, blah. It just felt a bit kind of, oh, we need to write a backstory. Let's just write this. We'll chuck this in,
A bit of expositional dialogue, just in case people aren't quite sure what's going on. The story about the family and the child could have been really interesting, actually. And the struggle and what the dynamic was that caused this. Was it the death of the father? Was there, some kind of terrible thing happened that nobody talks about, which was what you sort of intimate, but they don't tell us that. Instead of which, for me, it almost turns into a kind of MacGuffin. In other words, an event or a character who exists only to make the story happen.
Yeah, the fact they don't flesh out anything to do with the son. Or there's a line where Kevin Bishop has been asleep, lying across his son in the bed, and I've actually found that quite moving because it's difficult not to get moved by the situation. But at one point it says, "I love him so much, Mum." Oh, you didn't need to say that. Now that's ruined it for me. Because why would you even bother to say that? And there's another scene where Maggie's son, played by Kevin Bishop, discovers that she's been performing sexual services, and is absolutely disgusted and appalled, and calls her a whore and all this kind of stuff. He then has an argument with his wife in the hospital, where he says, "My mum's a whore, and I can't believe she would do this," and she says, "But wouldn't you do anything to save your kid?" And it feels like the writers are trying to say, this is the moral dilemma at the heart of the story. And it's not a moral dilemma at all.
No,
exactly. I would get out the moisturiser and do that myself, She ends up taking pride in her work.
Yes,
which is quite kind of tart with a heart kind of trope.
Yes.
That I'm the best in Soho.
Yes.
That feels like a little bit like a male fantasy that she would, she'd wear that mantle with pride,
I know. And in fact, the nature of the work is such, you think, well, it doesn't actually have to be a woman doing it, does it?
No, exactly. This is why I said I would do it to save my child's life, You can do 2 at a time,
Exactly, but it has to be a woman doing it because that's women's work. And in fact, actually, the film at that point could have unpacked the way in which she is servicing men's sexual desires. There's a massive market for this, and yet her son disapproves of her, not the men who demand these services.
Exactly, yeah.
But it doesn't interrogate the gender relations and power dynamic at all. He just blames her. Now, at one level, you could say, well, so why can't we unpack this a little bit? She could have come back at him and said, well, okay, I'm doing this because there's an enormous market for men who want these services out there. Don't you think that might be a bit of an issue here, Because none of that is explored. And actually, it's the daughter-in-law who's much more reasonable, isn't it?
What do you think of Mickey, the club owner, as a performance?
Yeah, I mean, he's very sleazy at first, isn't he? Sleazy and indifferent. And there's that whole thing about constructed indifference. Very often in these kind of films, when the sex show is put on, the underlying kind of depiction suggests that women do this because they want to, and that men are somehow just indifferent to it. You know the obligatory scene you always get in cop shows where they always meet in a bar, don't they, with women writhing around poles or something, and the cops are having a conversation with some woman trying to drape herself over them, saying, look at me, oh, go away, we've got important men's stuff to do here. I mean, it's almost like his indifference is almost akin to that. He's seen it all, not interested, But then we're supposed to believe that he's sort of somehow fallen in love with her. But that part of the story isn't really developed in a way that's terribly credible.
No, and he has an equivalent scene to the pub scene. There's a little scene towards the end where they kind of share their backgrounds, and
that's right.
His heart was broken, and so he's forced to end up exploiting women in a
it's a woman's
Soho
fault, obviously.
Yeah.
But he's found her because she is a pure woman underneath all this, isn't she?
Yeah, absolutely.
But the other thing about this film is there are no real supportive relationships between women, and that's the thing that really got me. Older women in the film, but Jenny Agut's character, and that circle of female friends who are all more kind of slightly higher class position maybe than her, certainly more snobbish and uncaring. And the way in which they're depicted it reminds me of somebody who'd been watching Midsummer Murders. They're kind of cardboard cutouts of village women, And they're all sitting around playing bridge, for goodness sake.
And that's what middle-aged ladies do in the countryside.
Oh, of course it is. Yeah, so far so cliched, But they're also horrible to her. And she has no supportive network of women. And you know what? That's not my experience of the world. And it really strikes me over and over again. But when men write stories about women, they very rarely show the support networks that women provide for each other. What they show is women being divided from each other, competing for men's attention one way or another, squabbling, being nasty, bitchy. I'm not saying women can't be like that, but most women actually have a whole group of friends as well. And I was also really powerfully struck that the woman's devotion is to men. So not only is she servicing men sexually, she is devoted to her son and to her grandson. And so she sacrifices herself for them, basically. And I don't think the filmmakers are fully cognizant of the way in which, that's a very standard representation of women's role in relation to men.
Yeah. Oh, they do give them that one scene we've talked about in the pub. That kind of, aren't men bad? Oh, yes, other men are bad too.
Exactly.
But
it doesn't pass the Bechdel test. It
definitely doesn't. No.
Because all women do is relate to men and only talk about men. And then she talks about her son and her grandson. She never talks about anything else, basically. And the two women, their lives are constructed entirely in relation to men, even when the film thinks it's doing something a bit radical. Just before I go, the whole idea that she's commuting in from this rather nice sort of commuter village with a village shop, again, rather implausible village shop and all that, to go to Soho, again, feels completely far-fetched, doesn't it? Make her live in a suburb of London or something rather than coming. It's in Northamptonshire, apparently, that village, the location.
Yeah, actually, I was reading some international reviews which are much more favourable than the British ones. There is that thing when you see a film, especially when you see a subtitle film, it gives it a sense of being an art house film, even though it could just be some piece of standard tosh. And I wonder if those reviews did see it as a kind of gritty, not kitchen sink, but that kind of thing. And the lots of those refer to her as being a suburban housewife, but she's not a suburban housewife. She's a rural housewife.
Yeah. Well, this is why some of the stuff, as I say, looked like it came out of Midsummer Murders. And in fact, the opening shot is an aerial shot of this rather attractive village, which has got all the, it's got a village school.
Very nice shot. I thought it was in for some. I was quite kind of geared up for a great film when I saw that shot.
I know. I thought this is really interesting, but then it doesn't really make anything of it. So it's almost as though the kind of decisions about location were driven by cost or something, and then they didn't really develop it in terms of a narrative. And I suspect in a way that's probably also the fact that the people making it aren't really they're not really wholly familiar with the nuances of city, suburb, village that you're going to get in that kind of English culture. I don't know. I mean, I'm just speculating here, but it did seem odd.
Although I thought they did get initially when I saw the kind of little council estate on the edge of the village, I thought, that's quite nuanced in its sense of the British class system, and also the fact that she's kind of dropped down a peg or two in the class system since she was widowed. So I thought, this does feel like it's got a handle on the British class system, but it's about the only thing Maybe they've learned about that in sociology. This is in England, they do this with their class. This is their class system.
Yes, exactly. Yes. You're completely excluded from the inner circle once you've become widowed.
Yeah.
I don't know. And you've moved to an ex-council house,
Yeah.
I'm probably being too literalist here, actually. But trouble is, when a film has these flaws, you do start asking those questions, because it just doesn't
and you
hang
start to
together.
pick at it. Yeah, it's like a jumper. You pull one thread and everything starts to come apart. Yeah. Well, maybe Peter Bradshaw was right.
Yes, perhaps he was. I think it's a pity, but that was Marianne Faithfull's sort of swan song, really, in some ways. Because I think that I wish she could have made a better film, a film which didn't carry with it a problematic baggage, and perhaps could have done something a bit more interesting if she was going to make a film,
Yeah, although I think she was quite proud of it. I read a small review and she got an award, a Norwegian award for it. Again, as a foreign language film, people appreciated it more.
Well, I'm glad about that. I'm glad
she liked it anyway. I hope she didn't read Peter Bradshaw's review.
Yeah, indeed.
Irina Palm did for a while spawn a short-lived legacy, an annual Critics' Award for the worst British films of the year. It was named in honour of Irina Palm and was called, of course, the Irina Palm d'Or. It was last awarded in 2013 and the winner that year was Run for Your Wife, which I sadly missed. Thank you to Estella Tinknell for making the time to join me on Soho Bites to talk about Irina Palm. Estella has a book coming out later this year which sounds very Soho Bites adjacent. It's published by Bloomsbury and it's called Reframing the Long 1960s on British Screens, Masculinity, Crime and Nostalgia. 3 of my favourite things. And thanks again to Laura Watson from the ECP. As usual, you'll find information about my guests and their work in the show notes over at sohobitespodcast.com, where you'll also find details on how to support the show. And talking of support, we are grateful for the continued support of the Museum of Soho, who often accommodate me in their gallery at the All Is Joy building at 75 Dean Street to do recordings for the show. Check them out at mosoho.org.uk. Soho Bites is produced by me, Dom DeLargy, and is based on an original idea by Dr. Jing and Young. This episode came out slightly late, but hopefully next month's episode will be slightly less late. Until then, look after yourselves, and bye for now.